Today I'm going to give a little introduction because there are new faces here, so I want to make sure that everyone understands, because we're in the middle of the subject. Very short. In one hand, the Torah tells us in the Leviticus 18 there is a long list of prohibited relations. Obviously, even in a modern society, you understand that cohabitation between man and his daughter, man and his mother, etc., sister, brother, prohibited. The Torah extended it to next level, which is the in-laws. The next level, shniyot la'arayot. So basically we're talking about man and his daughter-in-law, the wife of his son, man and his mother-in-law, man with his mother of his mother, mother of his father, man with a brother's wife, etc. All of that list, it's called arayot, and each of them it's called isurei erva. It's abomination, it's prohibited by the Torah law. On the contrary, the Torah tells us in Deuteronomy 25 that if there are case of two brothers, we just use names, Reuven and Shimon, and Reuven marry, let's say, Esther, and Reuven passed away, now it turns around, and we want to perpetuate the name of the deceased, and therefore Shimon, the Torah asks him to levirate, meaning to go ahead and marry and redeem, or whatever you call it, levirate action, and marry Esther, and the goal is solely to perpetuate the name of the deceased. The Torah goes further to say that if Shimon, the surviving brother, does not wish to act in a levirate manner toward Esther, he must do which is called וחליצה, is the act of release. The Torah gives the details with the שהוא, etc. It's a ritual that release her to go ahead and marry whoever she wished to. Here we're dealing in this chapter, in this tractate in general, but particularly in this chapter, with different stages of either way, such as if, for example, there are several brothers. For our discussion, let's call it simply in the biblical names, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, the sons of Yaakov and Leah. And Reuven is no longer among the living. But before he passed, he married several wives, especially in that time it was common. And now Shimon, he did the first stage of intent of marriage. Unlike in a regular manner, which is the act of betrothal, here we call some type of betrothal agreement, such as a written contract, such as give her valuable, in our modern days, you give her diamond, you give her whatever, something that carries valuable. And you show, meaning Shimon shows a letter of intent in some manners to marry Esther, which is the first wife of the deceased. That's called ma'amar. So if I use today the word ma'amar many times, it means the first stage of intent to go ahead and marry the surviving wife of the deceased by his brother, deceased brother. The next step is the get. In the regular manner of husband and wife, get is basically the bill of divorce that release her from their marital relationship. She can go ahead and marry outside of that marriage agreement. But we asking questions in certain circumstances, such as Shimon, for our discussion, behave, for example, he gave Esther ma'amar, meaning he showed Esther that he intended to marry her, and with Tamar, for example, the second wife, he gave a get. And now we ask a question, if he changed his mind by any manner, what exactly the status of those two women and his status? Furthermore, what's the status of other brothers in regards to interaction of those women? So we're asking in both ways, not only in a manner of future plans, but also in interaction between those brothers and the immediate family of those two surviving wives of the oldest brothers. Okay? Now we are on page 53, in the middle of the page. Keitzad ma'amar lazo. So the Mishnah dealing with if you have two Yevamot, as we said, we're just using name Esther and Tamar, and they need either way with Shimon, with the brother. So what did he do? Ma'amar lazo, he did, for example, with a, let's call her the original, just for our sake, the original first wife, Esther, he did ma'amar with her, and he did וחליצה, release, with Tamar. Now, what we understand, so if he gave ma'amar to the first one, וחליצה to the second one, so we understand, according to the way we learn Shmuel, that he cannot do וחליצה to the first one. Why? Because that's called, if you remember yesterday, we call it וחליצה psula. So it's disqualified וחליצה. Why? Because it's not enough. Let's think together. He gave ma'amar to Esther. Originally, Esther has some type of ban, zika ban, by merely fact that she was formerly married to his brother. By nature, if he had some boundaries by having this ma'amar, now when he acts in a matter of וחליצה, if it was not ma'amar preceding to that, וחליצה releases Esther. But since he did ma'amar, now the וחליצה, it's not sufficient. We call the language as inferior וחליצה, because she needs, according to Shmuel, in addition to a וחליצה, also get, in order to release her lashuk, to everyone else. Versus the second one.
But if he
did, just give me another second. The moment he did וחליצה with the second one, she can go ahead and marry anyone she wants, muteret lashuk, yes.
But can he then go forward and and complete the marriage with the first one after you do וחליצה with the other one?
Why not?
Well, when he does וחליצה with the one, doesn't he essentially release both of them with וחליצה?
Wait a second.
And so now they're his brother's sister, and he's,
according to Shmuel, okay.
Yeah.
By doing ma'amar,
right.
It's basically the first stage of.
I understand that. Yep.
And by doing וחליצה with the second one, he basically freeing her to go out and marry.
I understand.
So now, if he changes his mind and he's no longer interested
he has
in
to give
the first
it
one,
to the other one.
He has to give in addition to וחליצה. The וחליצה, it's called psula. It's not sufficient.
The וחליצה he gave to the other one is not sufficient. He has to give a get as well because he did ma'amar.
Correct.
But doesn't it put the whole status, the ma'amar status, at question if he gave וחליצה to the other one already?
Not by Shmuel.
Okay, but I mean the sages, do they?
The sages, yes. So
okay, all right.
למה מסייע לשמואל?
Sorry.
דאמר שמואל, חלץ לבעלת מאמר, לא נפטרה צרתה. You hear? Shmuel said, that's a proof, ראיה. So he said, if you do וחליצה to the one who has מאמר, the one, the tzara, still need to be released. Why? If you remember, we studied on page 50 that Shmuel hold when you have two Yevamot, two different wives, that need one yavam, one chalitza has an effect more than the other, so the chalitza that it's inferior not release the other one that needs a better chalitza, which means here they said utyuvta de Rav Yosef. Why? Do you remember we study on page 44? Rav Yosef said a person should not spill a quality water if he doesn't need it, maybe someone else needs it. For example, if you have a clothing, we're getting close to the holiday season, right? So all these lighthouse, homeless drives, all different organizations come to us and said, look, if you have shoes, if you have clothing, if you have whatever it is, don't throw it away, give it to us. Salvation Army, whatever it is, right? Here we have two different Yevamot. Remember, as far as the Kohen is concerned, regular, not Kohen Gadol, cannot marry divorcee. Okay? If the woman, meaning the wife, the surviving wife, released, she can marry a Kohen. If she divorced, then she excluded for marriage with Kohen by the Torah law. So the question is, according to Rav Yosef, why should he does chalitza to the second one, to the co-wife? He should do chalitza to the first wife. Tosfot further on tells us that we can bring that as both proof to Shmuel and challenge Rav Yosef. Why? According to Shmuel, chalitza has to be with the intent to the co-wife. Why? Because he called it superior chalitza, meshubachat, not to the one who received the ma'amar, that it's inferior. So it means you have, or, Tosfot said, either way, or a proof to Shmuel, or question of Rav Yosef. Mi katane, Gemarrah rejected and said, choletz, chalatz ktane de avad, which means that's not the way we wish to, but he is okay after the fact. It does not indicate what the preferred procedure is, which means, again, the whole idea is by force of circumstance. So get lazo ve get lazo, meaning the Mishnah tells us if he gave get to both of them. So let's think together. A regular manner of husband and wife, you gave the get, goodbye, right? But since here originally, what did the Torah tell us? The wishes was to have ייבום. Since he gave get to those wives, the Mishnah tells us it's not enough, they need chalitza. But the Mishnah used the term plural, tzrichot. Not tzrichat, tzrichot, meaning both. So the question is, why both need chalitza? Leima מסייע לרבה ברב יהודה, דאמר רבא ברב הונא, חליצה פסולה צריכה לחזר על כל האחים. If you have a case of several brothers, one of them did in a way disqualified chalitza, so needs to have each individual of the brothers need to have a separate chalitza. So the Gemara said, "My tzrichot, tzrichot de alma," which means it's a general requirement, chalitza, and the plural, that it's not the idea of both Yevamot need chalitza. Here, in this case, and the other one in a similar case. Get lazo v'chalatz lazo. If he gave get to one and the other one he did chalitza, so the Mishnah said that it's ein achar chalitza klum. When he did after chalitza, it's not lema mesera leShmuel. What did Shmuel say? that if you do וחליצה, the one who received the get, it's still not exempt the rival, the co-wife, from release. So here you see it's considering וחליצה, the one who received a get, it's inferior וחליצה in regards to the other. Why? Because it's reduced the zikah bond between them. So Shmuel said that it needs to have release also the other one. Would have yet to with Rav Yosef. Why? Because Rav Yosef said that he has to be to the disqualified Yevamah in order to disqualify the other one. Mi ktanei choletz, chalatz ktanei diavad. The same answer. Chalatz vechalatz or chalatz, which means he released one of the Yevamot and then the second one, etc., etc. So they said after that it's nothing. Velitename enachar bi'a klum. Now for those who just first time here, we need to explain a little bit the concept of bi'a. The Gemara tells us at the early part of Tractate Kiddushin that there are different, biblically speaking, different manner of betrothal. One of them, for sure, it's the contract, it's the monetary, but also it's the cohabitation. Biblically speaking, cohabitation created a marriage bond. Yet, the rabbis tells us, we studied it yesterday, that it's incongruous, it's inappropriate. The rabbis came in and said, no, even in a manner of ייבום, that obviously, potentially, they're going to have a marriage between the two, he should do first ma'amar, he should do some act of betrothal, because otherwise it's immodest, it's inappropriate. You should do in a regular manner of, but again, by the dry biblical law, cohabitation is sufficient, okay? So now we ask a question. He said, since you talk about manner of release to one, the second one, etc. So they ask, how about, since you talk about after that is nothing else, it's over, the deal is over, you can go and the other one, they said the moment that you have an act of the intercourse, it's over. Velitnei en achar bi'a klum. Abaye veRava, the Amrei Travayu, they both say, Tnei, you should learn, ein achar bi'a klum. There is no validity to anything after cohabitation, or the Bach said none. Anyway, Vetana didan, hatarat yevama lashuk adif alei. Beautiful. So the idea of releasing the Yevamah to a general population, it's better. You guys need to tell me, why is that?
Well, less restrictions on her so that she can move on with her life, essentially.
Why? I give you a hint.
Well, I mean, we don't want to leave her in a, I mean, we've talked about it before, it's like a state of limbo. That she can't go on with her life, she can't, have another relationship, and,
I give you a hint.
Fine.
Right? The Rashash tells us, we study Abba Shaul on page 39. Now you tell me, what did Abba Shaul say? What do you remember? Abba Shaul, what did he say? He said that in a normal manners, why the state of Israel doesn't have ייבום? Start with Ashkenazi, now also Sephardim. Why they ask only for וחליצה? Because they follow Abba Shaul. We study Abba Shaul on page 39, who said, wait a second, you remember there is a long list we read on Yom Kippur afternoon, all these lists of abominations?
Right.
Oh, wait a second, Abba Shaul said. The Torah asked the brother, the surviving brother, to act in a manner of ייבום, of levirate, solely and only if it's in his interest to perpetuate the soul of the deceased. But unfortunately, I am pragmatic person, Abba Shaul said. And guess what's going to happen? He may do that like the story of Book of Ruth. You remember? Before Boaz, Ploni Almoni, Tov? It may be this guy wants her money, or wants her property, or wants her beauty, or wants to be connected to her family. There's all kind of other motivations. So he hold, wait. You know what? It's krova be'enai. I feel like, it's basically almost arayot, almost list of that abomination. And therefore, he goes to the next step, and he says, I warn you guys that the baby that come out of that marriage, of that cohabitation, it's an issue of mamzerut, it's an issue of legitimacy. That's Abba Shaul mindset. So, in a practical manner, the state of Israel chief rabbinate, even it was Yemenite, it was Sephardim that does that, but in general term, now is no longer only for Ashkenazim. They do only וחליצה, they don't do ייבום. Why? Because they follow Abba Shaul's mindset. They realize that the Torah in Deuteronomy 25, when they said it's a big mitzvah for the surviving brother to redeem the soul of the deceased, it's if it's sincere intent to do it. But since you read the story of Onan in the book of Bereshit, the sons of Yehuda, that he wasn't an interest. He wants just to have the beauty of Tamar and carry on, and he spit his sperm on the ground, remember, and makes God angry. Right? And you see the story of Ploni Almon in the book of Ruth, that he was interested in Ruth because it's a property left from Elimelech. But the moment Boaz challenged that, he backed out. Two cases, right? So therefore, Abba Shaul said, most of the guys are not sincere. And as long as it's not sincere, you have not just issue of that marriage, of that levirate marriage, you have issue of the illegitimacy of the baby. And therefore backed off. Right? That's Abba Shaul. The sages disputed him, but that's the view of Abba Shaul. Here the Rashash reminded, and said, now you see Atarat Yevamah Lashuk Adif Alei. He preferred to discuss the release of the Yevamah to the general population. The Rashash said, Lechatchila, it should be וחליצה. Verstehst? Everyone understand? Good. Then the Mishnah continues. Ben Yavam Echad Lishte Yevamot. Bishlama LeRabbi Yochanan de'amar Kula Beita Belav Kai. Okay. So here we need to remind ourselves something important. There are two different levels of biblical violations. One is the severe, it's called karet, and one is called lav. Karet, the Torah used the term, that soul shall be cut off by heavenly punishment. Right? That's severe, something that is in a heavy violation. Cohabitation of the brother's wife. Okay? Right? He's alive, etc., etc. Karet. You have negative commandment. It's called in our language Isurei Lavin, which the person is in violation, but not the same level of karet. Okay? So here, if Yavam releases Yevamah, meaning if Shimon went ahead and he released Esther, so now if he, after the fact, went back and cohabited with her, so he is in violation, lo yivneh, right? He should not do it. But that violation is a negative commandment. It's not karet. It's not under the severe category of that soul shall be cut off. Okay? So he holds, Rabbi Yochanan hold, that in that sense all this house, all this concept, it's the subject merely to a negative commandment against intimacy after the manner of release. It's tzrich le'ashmu inan. So we need to teach us why the en kiddushin tofsim b'chayei levei lavin. You remember we learned that disputation with Rish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan, learn Rabbi Akiva, etc. That the moment you have a violation, meaning you release that woman, and now you cohabited with her, so that betrothed is not in effect. We don't consider that as a manner of betrothed. And therefore, if you remember Rabbi Akiva, he said that that baby is mamzer. Ela leRish Lakish de'amar kula beita bekaret kai, which means all that house, excluding the choletz and the choletzet, they are in the prohibition of karet. It's tzrich le'ashmu inan, the en kiddushin tofsim b'chayavei kreitot. So it is really necessary for the Tanah to tell us that the kiddushin with that woman has no effect under the severe penalty of that soul shall be cut off, correct? The way that you understand Seifa de Katane Baal ve'asa ma'amar, meaning since you already intercourse with her, so think together with me, right? It's improper, right? But he already done that, right? He already did it. So now the ma'amar is meaningless because we said after the be'ilah, after that manner, ma'amar is everything, right? It's done. It's צריך להשמועינן דאין קידושין תופסים באשת איש. If she's a married woman, any manner of betrothed is meaningless, right? Because she is a married woman. So, meaning the first Yavam that cohabited with her, she is just his wife, and it's obviously that any manner of kiddushin, it's not in effect. Ela, you have to say, Tosfot challenge. Ela, aide de Tana hatarat Yavam v'Yevama achat, since the Tana taught all different way that the release of one Yavam and one Yevama, Tananame shte Yevamot v'Yavam echad. He also speaks about something similar, all in the concept of lo yivne. Ve'aide de Tana shte Yevamot v'Yevama achat, Tani namei shne Yevamim v'Yevama achat. 53b, Chalatz v'asa ma'amar v'natan. So if the Yavam first perform Chalitza with the Yevama, and then he either perform ma'amar with her, or gave her a get, or have cohabitation with her, so is no validity to anything after he did Chalitza. So again, we learn it twice. One in the first part of the Mishnah, and then at the very, very end of the Mishnah. Maharsha asks why is twice. Anyway, Bishlam Chalatz v'asa ma'amar itztrich. סקרא תחמינה נגזור מאמר דבתר חליצת ומאמר דקמי חליצה כמשמלן דלא גזרינן אלא חלץ ונתן גט למה לי? Because it's obviously that the get after the חליצה is no meaning. חליצה, it's over. Why are you giving get? ולטעמיך, and according to you view that you think each part of the Mishnah is necessary, let's go to the last clause of the Mishnah. They are dealing with two different situations. Baal v'asamamar, Baal v'natan get, right? So first you have the manner of cohabitation, and then it's either one of the two, either mamar or get. Bishlama, Baal v'natan get itzrich. Sagad atachamen nigzor get batar bila to get kamei bila, kamashman b'lo gazrina. Aval Baal v'asamamar lamali, because the moment that he have relation with her, so she's his wife. So what's the meaning of the ma'amar that preceding it? Ela aide de tana chalatz v'samamar, tanami baal v'samamar. V'aide de baal mitne baal v'natan get, taninami chalatz v'natan get. So that's not a chidush, that's by the way. Bizman shehi. So the Mishnah concluded, but when it's come to the manner of cohabitation, when it is, which means the very beginning, so is no validity to anything afterward. Madini de lo ka'etana de Tanya. Abba Yossi ben Yochanan, או אבא יוסי בן חנן, איש ירושלים אומר משום רבי מאיר, אחת בעילה ואחת חליצה, they are equal. בתחילה אין אחריה כלום, באמצע ובסוף יש אחריה כלום. ושלוש מחלוקות בדבר. There are three views, because we hold that חליצה פסולה, which means חליצה that was made after מאמר or get, so it's nothing there. סבר, תנא קמא סבר ביאה, דאיכא חליצה גזרינן, חליצה דלקא למגזר לא גזרינן. נחמיה סבר ביאה נמי לקא למגזר, ודקאמר לגזור על ביאה אחר גט, משום ביאה אחר חליצה, כיוון דחליצה דאורייתא מידא ידי. So you know that the zikah bond is no longer in effect by the bi'ah after the get, because after the chalitza is not going to cohabitate with the kamar, לגזור בי'ah אחר מאמר משום בי'ah אחר בי'ah. I respond, כיוון דבי'ah דאורייתא המידע ידעי. That's the second. And then you have Rabbi Yossi ben Hanan. Rabbi Yossi ben Hanan hold that even וחליצה פסולה, that deficient וחליצה is not fully effective, the act of the zikah bond, סבר לה כרבנן, he holds the same as the majority of the sages, the gazrei who have a decree בביאה, that the deficient cohabitation is not fully effective, which is the psula, וגזר חליצה משום ביאה, and he decreed that deficient חליצה not be fully effective because of the concern with the confusion with the deficient cohabitation. So, as we said earlier, that we don't have any concern in regards to deficient chalitza itself, but the sages put anyway a decree, the majority of them, that because you have a situation of deficient cohabitation, the act of the effectiveness, it has total limitation. Hadran alach, Rabban Gamliel. Chapter 6, הבעל יבמתו, בין בשוגג, בין במזיד, בין באונס, בין ברצון. If some cohabited with his yevama, if it happens by mistake, Rashi said, it's all kind of, he thought that she is a wife and she was different, like Jacob and Rachel and Leah, right? Just to conceptualize what is it. Or the other one, it's the in a certain situation that it was unintentional wish, or one of them intend one not. אפילו הוא שוגג והיא מזידה, הוא מזיד והיא שוגגת, הוא אנוס והיא לא אנוסה, היא אנוסה והוא לא אנוס. אחד המערה ואחד הגומר, which means one who begin the manner of cohabitation, one who is the completes it kana. So it's already, she's his wife. ולא חילק בין ביאה לביאה. So we not differentiate what manner of the cohabitation, the moment it happens, it's over. וכן הבא על כל אחת מכל העריות שבתורה. The Torah gave us a long list, Leviticus 18. And we learn in chapter 2, if you remember, that anyone who cohabited with them, it's in a correct punishment. That's the famous Rambam Ilchot Ishut, the first chapter, based on that text in the Torah. So all psulot, those who are prohibited, either Meiri said in Isurei Lav, negative commandment, for example, Almana to Kohen Gadol, or Psulei Kahal, כגון אלמנה לכהן גדול, גרושה וחלוצה לכהן אדיוט, ממזרת ונתינה לישראל, בת ישראל לממזר ולנתין, פסלה, ולא חילק בין ביאה לביאה. So the moment that happened, it's disqualified, and we don't, the Torah did not differentiate between one form of cohabitation to another. So the Gemara said, "Mai afilu." Why it's the meaning when we said even, if he did it by mistake and she did it by intent, what does that mean even? What's the chidush? לא מבעיה כמה, לא מבעיה הוא שוגג והיא כמכוונה למצווה. If, for example, the Yavam, when he mistaken and she intends to fulfill the mitzvah, אינמי הוא מזיד והיא כמכוונה למצווה. אלא אפילו הוא שוגג והיא מזידה, or the Bach said, הוא מזיד והיא שוגגת, דתרווי הוא לא מכוונה לשם מצווה אפילו, אחרי כנה, even the intent, בדיעבד, it's act of acquisition, and that's part of the קניין ייבום, תנא רבי חייא, אפילו שניהם שוגגים, שניהם מזיעים, שניהם אנוסים, makes no difference what exactly the circumstance, the moment, nevertheless, it's a valid ייבום. Anus de matnitin heichedam. Explain to me those special relationships that came out under that definition of anus. Ile makshan asu nochrim u'ba'alea. If you tell me that the idol worshippers, the Ritva said, they came with guns and said, you must cohabit with her. Okay? ואמר רבא, אין אונס לערווה לפי שאין קישור לדעת. He said, it cannot be a forceful act because he hold, look how smart the rabbis. You don't need Sigmund Freud, right? You don't need Carl Jung or Adler. He said that it cannot be a man that was forced to cohabitate because it has the consent of the order of the brain, the neurological order, in order to have the act. Meaning, if you don't give an order in your brain, it's not going to happen even they pull guns on you. Ela biyashen, meaning he was at asleep. Remember the story of Lot and his daughters in the cave? So, ve'amar Rav Yehuda, the Gemarrah challenged that and he said, 54, yashen lo kaina bivimto. Part of the matter of acquisition, it's gmirut da'at, which means partner A to partner B, Mr. A to Mrs. B, Mr. A has to have the manner of acquisition, which means you have to fully comprehend what you're doing. While a person is in a state of sleep, he cannot tell me that he intends to have this manner of cohabitation, and therefore you can speak about manner of total acquisition. Ela benitka. אמר רבא, נפל מן הגג ונתקע, חייב בארבעה דברים, ובהיבמתו לא קנה. Again, this is a hypothetical scenario. He fall from a roof, and he basically damaged her, and cohabited with her. So there are all four forms of payment, nezek, tsar, ripui, shevet, he needs to pay, but as far as the Yevamah, is not a matter of acquisition. אלא כגון שנתכוון לאשתו, ותקפתהו יבמתו ובעליה. So he intend to his wife, and she basically attack or seduce him, and he have relations. So they said, שניהם אנוסים דבר אברכי היחידמי, כגון שנתכוון לאשתו, ותקפו נוכרים ודיבקו עם זה בזה ובעליה. So again, he has the manner to do it, but it was for different purpose, and then other forcefully as for menanimi. How do you learn it? Tanu Rabbanan. Torah said, Yevamah yavo elea. Mitzvah. דבר אחר, יבמah יבוא אליה, בין בשוגג, בין במזיד, בין באונס וברצון. והפקיקתי למצווה. למצווה, מביאים לו יחפוץ האיש נפקא, החפץ. If you wish to, you have the mitzvah, יבם. וכי את הקרא, בין בשוגג, בין במזיד, בין באונס, בין ברצון. Makes no difference. The intent. תניא אידך, יבמah יבוא אליה כדרכה, which means, soon you explain what does that mean, but ulkacha shelo kedarka. So it means even the Rashba and Ritva said that it was in a manner of cohabitation, it is not a normal manner, so it still have an effect of kinyan. Ve'yibem bi'a gomeret ba. That's the final stage of the acquisition. Ve'en kesef ushtar gomrim ba. The completion of the kinyan is Yevamah yavo elea ve'yibem. That the ייבום, that's the final stage. And they said, ואין כסף ושטר גומרים בה, ויבמה בעל כוחה. So even it was against her will, since it was, then it's already a manner of acquisition. דבר אחר, יבמה יבוא אליה, בין בשוגג, והפיקטי לדרכה, we just said, ההוא מלהקים שם אחיו נפקא. במקום שמקים שם. You remember that the idea? Because we explained that the whole purpose, remember Abba Shaul? The whole purpose is to perpetuate the name. So if that was a regular manner of cohabitation, for sure she can get pregnant and have a child, and it's a continuation of the name. במקום שמקים שם וחיית הקרא בין בשוגג בין מזיד בין באונס בין רצון. So in other words, the idea of Yevamah yavo elea, that he cohabited with her, which is a manner of cohabitation, applies to any circumstance, regardless if it was intentional, unintentional, forceful, etc. And then we learn from the text, ulekachalo leisha, manner of acquisition, which means even it's not in a normal way, it's still acquisition. Yyibem, which means he have to say that only bi'ah, it's a manner of acquisition, but not money or contract. And the hey v'yibma, meaning even it was be'al korcha, against the will. So they said, Gufa Marav Yehuda, Yashen lo kana bivimto, Damarka Yevama Yavo Elea, Adi mitkaven l'shem bi'ah. So it means, as we said, he is not bardat, he doesn't have the full mind comprehension, or because he's not intent to have that. Tanya ben ben yashenu ben eirahi ben yashanahi achav ma'askin b'mitnamnem. Mitnamnem, it's like he is about, but he's not totally in a state of sleeping. He is like dozing off. It's not total. So it's Rav Yehuda, on the other hand, refers to one who's fully asleep. Hey chedam mitnamnem. Give me a situation of dozing. So simple answer is you cannot drive a car like that, right? Amarava shenim lo nim, tir lo tir. He is asleep, but not completely asleep. Awake, but not completely. Kegon bekarolei ve'anei. People call him and he responds. So they ask him a question, v'lo yada la'adur esvara. But he's not sufficiently alert to give a response that requires reasoning, right? So he is not there totally. V'chi midkulei midkar. But if they remind him something, so all of a sudden he remember. So that's that state. So he's not, he doesn't have, we learn it in Pesachim 120. That's the situation that he's not totally aware of what's going on, but he's there in part. So that's the idea of does of. So therefore, this is the question, if it, as far as the dry law, if you consider that as a matter of acquisition and matter of intent, or you say that the person is not fully there, and therefore you cannot consider that as a total formal form of intent, and the act of acquisition has no effect.